and pride, somebody who was queer,
as opposed to being treated like they were just cattle or livestock.
Exactly.
For us, I think we can look back to every fight for justice and find our place in it. And the same is true today. As we continue to look at our pride in every year since then, with the exception of the pandemic year, I think.
Yep.
But pride and the struggle for liberation is not just tied to your sexual orientation. It is the work of inclusivity for everybody's struggle.
Absolutely.
Because people who are trying to find a place in this society that have come from El Salvador.
Right.
Because if you come from Europe, you can get in without a problem. But when we consider
But for our black
their
and brown
struggles,
siblings,
we must also consider, as Dr. Burley pointed out, how can we as black folk
right,
not see and align with the struggles of all people,
right,
regardless of where they are.
Yep, and that's, I love that you named the specifics. We think about immigration, because sometimes you'll see people, well, why do immigrants get this and why do immigrants get that? And they feel like they're getting special rights. But they didn't pick the rights that they get. Yeah. The powers that be that also chose the things that oppress and marginalize us create these opportunities for us to be looking at each other and fighting each other. And it's like, no, trans people are not the problem. Immigrants are not the problem. Women are not the problem. These are all groups that are traditionally not in power and the easiest to blame stuff on. And then if they can get us blaming the folks with least power in the situation, and they get us not looking at the folks who are making the decisions, not looking at the folks who are signing the checks, then all of a sudden we're just fighting with each other and getting nowhere. But as we look at this election year, as we look at what's happening in the media, as we look at this, Project 2025, like there's so many things that are organized against us, but we still are the global majority. Yeah. We still are the people who, when we come together and when each person brings the gifts, strengths, talents, resources that they have, that we too can rise up just like they did. Like somebody threw a brick, as the legend goes, somebody decided, hey, we're not gonna take this anymore. And again, for history, there was also the same time that the there was also the civil rights. There was also the anti-war movement. There was lots of people who were poor were also saying, I don't want to see this anymore. I don't think it has to be this way.
And many of those people were crossovers to the various movements. They didn't just fight in one fight. Jesse Jackson said, and I loved him for it, and in fact, and we live in a world where the house is on fire.
Exactly.
So I would really admonish all of my siblings as you are listening to this conversation, of rhetoric that keeps us as marginalized people hating on one another as opposed to coming together and fighting for our liberation.
Queer as a cis heterosexual man, and I've really been thinking about queerness as a state of being and not anything
it's political.
That's not anything that's associated sexuality or gender identity. And I think we need to challenge our faith leaders to queer their theology.
That's it.
To queer their theology, because queering theology invites love. Yes. And we're so glad to have one of our spiritual wellness partners, Reverend Don Abram, doing that type of work through his organization, Pride in the Pews. Yes. And we'll be a part of a gospel drag brunch this weekend. This weekend, so that we can continue to challenge faith communities to think about their theology in a queer framework,
right,
or identity, but linked to a framework, a politic that is about liberation, that is not just about the LGBT. When I think about the story of the woman with the issue of blood, and she had been bleeding for 12 years, and it says that Tim, and she was healed, but the scripture goes on to say that Jesus felt the power come from him. It didn't say that Jesus necessarily voluntarily gave his power away. I think even as communities of faith, we can't just sit around waiting.
We don't have to wait. We got to take our power.
Waiting for folks to give us power. We've got to take our power.
But I also want to lift up not only Reverend Abrams, who has done such a magnificent job through Pride and Pews, but also churches like New Covenant, history of being a part of the Baptist Convention, which is a very conservative convention, but yet, in spite of that, that we have done such a bad job in church welcoming LGBTQIA plus folk to the place where Jesus is, that now they don't like St. Stephen's, of whom I heard a wonderful pride message just a couple of weeks ago, delivered by Dr. Burley. Our idea that we are and preach and acknowledge a queer theology that brings into focus. That's right.
Come on over and get your free wristband today.
In the image of God.
Yes.
And are trying our best to be the people that God called us.
Absolutely. I want you to sign up. We've got a little registration form where you can come and participate in our classes. We typically have talk sessions with free food. We have all kinds of ways for you to find. Sexuality has a lot of hurt. I know I certainly have my own story of surviving spiritual abuse. I have my own story of being harmed for my queerness in church. But like we've been talking about today, to take back my power and to then begin to advocate for others to make sure others don't go through the same things that I went through. And so, again, this theme of right to pride, this theme of the way our spirituality is to connect. Any things you want to remind people to do when they connect with us? Besides, we got the gospel brunch.
Exercise or whatever you
name it.
We got.
Tell us what you need.
That's right.
All right. So thank you again for joining us. We're like at Market Days and at Love Fest in the fall.